It's the 1983 gubernatorial election in New York. A local lawyer and the former lieutenant governor of New York, Mario Cuomo, is running for office as the governor of the state of New York. Running for the Democratic Party in the immediate aftermath of the Cultural Revolution, a question inevitably arises. How does Cuomo, a practicing Catholic, reconcile his Catholic faith, which dogmatically teaches that abortion is a mortal sin and can never be permitted under any circumstances, with the platform of the Democratic Party, which supports a pro-choice position? To this, Cuomo responds in the following, now infamous, statement put forward during a 1984 speech delivered at Notre Dame University. "I'm personally opposed, but I don't want to force my personal views on anyone." This one statement causes an uproar. A Catholic politician publicly going against the teachings of the Church, endorsing a political ideology out of step with Church teaching, all while remaining Catholic? Cuomo then went on to clarify his position, saying, quote, "The Archbishop of New York City says, you, Mario, are a Catholic who agrees with me that abortion is an evil. I say, I agree with you, Archbishop, that as I see the world, abortion is not a good thing. I therefore will not encourage my daughters to have one, God forbid. I will not say that it is a good thing, and in so doing I will remain true to my belief and a member of the Church, which is more important to me than remaining a member of the Democratic Party." The Archbishop then says, "Okay, now I want you to insist that everybody believe what we believe. I'm entitled to make the case that everybody should, but once the law has decided contrary, I have to respect that too." Unquote. In a word, Cuomo argued that, as a Catholic, he could not in good conscience support abortion. He does not see abortion as morally good, and therefore would never encourage anyone to get an abortion. Yet he also feels that he needs to recognize the objective fact that the American legal system accepts a certain set of laws, one of which is that people have a right to an abortion. He cannot live his life, or pursue a career as a politician, going on acting as if this is not the case. He must respect both the law and the teachings of his Church. The law represents a code that governs one aspect of his life, and the teachings of the Church represent a set of teachings that govern another aspect of his life. The two are parallel and do not overlap. This attitude became paradigmatic of the mindset of an entire generation of left-leaning politicians who happen to be Catholic. Compartmentalize one's faith and one's politics, or even outright reject those aspects of one's faith that are not politically expedient or do not jive with one's political ideology. Such a view conflicts with the reality that our politics is downstream from our morality. And one of the factors that influences our morality is our religion. It is thus not unreasonable to expect politicians who claim to be a member of a specific religion to govern in accordance with their religious beliefs. At the very least, one could ask whether it makes sense to live by two different sets of value systems, one public and the other private, when they clearly and unambiguously conflict. If one's religion and one's political ideology conflict, shouldn't one either change their religious views or change their political views? American conservatives, who have long been champions of the notion of religion playing a very explicit and robust role in politics, culture, and political discourse, have long stated that this is a problem inherent to, and to some extent unique to, the left. Yet, it seems as if the tides are changing. In January of this year, Pope Leo XIV delivered a speech in which he condemned the use of overly militaristic foreign policies. In response, during a meeting between Cardinal Christophe Pierre, the Vatican diplomat to the United States, and Elbridge Colby, the Undersecretary for War Policy, Colby told Cardinal Pierre that, quote, "The United States has the military power to do whatever it wants, and that the Church had better take its side," unquote. Throughout the recent war in Iran, Pope Leo said in a series of interviews that the war was unjustified and was, on multiple levels, morally and socially problematic. In response to this, President Donald Trump said that Pope Leo did not understand the threat that Iran posed, and even falsely claims that Pope Leo wanted Iran to be in possession of nukes. J.D. Vance, Vice President of the United States, and himself a practicing Catholic, said that Pope Leo should, quote-unquote, stay out of politics, and that he should, quote-unquote, be careful when speaking on theology. So, let me get this straight. J.D. Vance, a relatively recent convert to Catholicism, who has very little formal training in theology, is the one telling Pope Leo, a lifelong Catholic who spent several years in seminary and who has been in active ministry for the past 4.5 decades, longer than the life of J.D. Vance, and who holds an office that allows him to be considered God's highest representative on earth, and who, under certain circumstances, has the ability to speak infallibly on matters of faith and morals, to be careful when speaking on matters of theology. But what is worse is the sad irony that J.D. Vance, a member of the party that has for decades been advocating for religion playing an active and integral role in public affairs, is now telling the Pope to remain silent on politics. The messaging is clear. The current motto of the Republican Party is, "We want religion to have a voice in politics, to have a seat at the table of public discourse, to play an active role in shaping the culture, unless it happens to disagree with us." While it is true that not every statement made by the Pope is infallible, or even authoritative, and to disagree with the Pope when the Pope is expressing a private, moral, or theological view, for example, in private conversation or during an interview, is not, in and of itself, heresy, schism, or any form of ecclesial insubordination, the words of President Trump and Vice President Vance are indicative of a broader spiritual attitude that is, in many ways, incompatible with the spirit of Catholicism, but which has been typical of the left for decades now. Even when the Pope is not speaking infallibly, or even when the Pope is wrong, ideally, a person is not elected to the office of Pope unless he is a man who knows the faith quite well, and who has much spiritual wisdom. Thus, when the Pope speaks, you should listen, and should take his opinions into consideration. The dismissive attitude of President Trump and Vice President Vance is thus indicative of a twofold mindset. One, the authority of the state is not subordinate to that of the Church, and two, the Church should play a major role in politics and the culture, but only when they agree with us, which implies that, for some in the Republican Party, their commitment to their political ideology is greater than their commitment to the truth. This is the issue that conservatives have been pinning on the left for decades, and is born out of the mindset that the faithful can practice politics in a manner that is autonomous from their faith and morality. That is, those things that serve as the most fundamental presuppositions for our worldview. The problem now arises, what are Catholics to do? For those Americans who attempt to be consistent in their political views, that is, who desire to create political ideologies that are consistent with the foundational elements of their worldview, they must realize that no one has their back. There is no political party that stands for what they stand for. The mainstream political parties will ally themselves with us Catholics only to the extent that it is politically advantageous to do so. Yet, as society changes, the hot-button issues of the day will also change, and thus there is the possibility that some conflict will arise between faithful Catholics or the Catholic Church on the one hand, and whatever political party is currently doing the most to appeal to us. Take, for example, how in the early 20th century, a lot of Catholics voted Democrat. This was because the Democratic Party did lots to fight against the abuses of capitalism, did a lot to fight for the poor and the working class, and was very pro-immigrant. Something that appealed to a lot of Catholics, since a lot of Catholics in this country were working class or of working class origins, and also since the majority of Catholics in this country in the early 20th century were either immigrants or the most recent descendants, like the children or grandchildren of immigrants. Yet starting in the middle of the 20th century, you saw the Cultural Revolution, and the Democrats accepted certain positions like the pro-LGBT position or the pro-abortion position that caused them to have a falling out with the Catholic Church. Thus, Catholic voters, who were once one of the most consistent and loyal demographics within the Democratic Party, were now not so certain about how to react, and a large number of Catholics began to leave the Democratic Party and support the Republican Party, which supported a more traditional view on these hot-button social issues. Yet, recent events seem to show that the Republican Party is more than willing to criticize the Catholic Church or throw the Catholic Church under the bus if the Pope or the Catholic Church says things that are in conflict with what they believe politically. We Catholics have no ideological home, and this is because none of the major political parties are in 100% conformity with what the Catholic Church teaches. And insofar as the majority of Americans are not Catholic, this reality is probably not going to change anytime soon.
Pope Leo denounced what he called the delusion of omniscience fueling the war with Iran and not naming anyone, demanded that leaders stop and negotiate peace. Now tonight, President Trump is slamming the Pope on social media and to reporters saying he should, quote, get his act together and stop catering to the radical left.
I don't like it. I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo. He's a very liberal person, and he's a man that doesn't believe in stopping crime. He's a man that doesn't think that we should be toying with a country that wants a nuclear weapon.
So Catholics must first take part in some introspection. We must first emotionally disconnect from our favorite political party, politician, or candidate, and realize that they will probably, at some point, most likely end up disagreeing with us as Catholics on some important issues. They will eventually betray us on some points, even if they agree with us on 75 or 90 or 95 or 99% of issues. Secondly, we must attempt to convert more people to the faith. The more people we convert to Catholicism, the more of the voter base and the more people running for public office will be Catholic, and therefore the more influence the Catholic Church will have in political discourse. We must not only vote for those candidates who not only are Catholic or claim to be Catholic, but who also take seriously their identity as Catholics, and who are thus the most likely to consistently vote in a Catholic way. We can also look to third parties, among whom are organizations that are explicitly based on the traditional moral, social, and political ideas of Catholicism or Christianity more generally. Either way, the Catholic Church can't continue to survive in the current environment. The Catholic Church cannot continue to survive thinking that we can look to external allies to bring about the sort of society that we think would be ideal. Catholics need to take control of their own political destiny. We need to start playing a more active role in shaping the society in a positive way. And we need to stop limiting our way of thinking about political issues to certain frameworks that are not in line with the Catholic framework, and do more to show that the Catholic Church has something to bring to the table, that the Catholic Church is not merely another demographic to be appealed to.